on the latest episode of the WNBA Crashout. We got another Crashout, man. This is crazy, man. We have to revisit a Crashout, and we have legend, Hall of Famer Rebecca Lobo actually finally setting these ladies straight. Yo, you guys are turning people off.
That energy right there, that dismissive, almost angry tone when talking about new fans, that's not an isolated incident. That's a pattern that's been building throughout the entire CBA negotiation process. And it's costing the WNBA something they can't afford to lose right now: public support. Elle Duncan said on ESPN that new fans are sucking the life out of the WNBA. Not bringing life to it, sucking it out. Let that sink in for a moment. The league just experienced its most watched season in over 2 decades, pulled in record sponsorship deals, and got wall-to-wall coverage on every major sports network. And one of the most prominent voices in women's basketball media is complaining about the fans who made that possible.
What? The new fans are sucking the life out of... No, the new fans breathe life into the WNBA because it was dead damn near. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about, Elle Duncan? This energy has translated up through now. Nasty work.
The truth. You are right. You are right, new fans. There has never been more viewership because of Caitlin Clark. There's never been more attention. They're doing 40 minutes on First Take about Caitlin Clark. They never did that before.
Hey, and you know what? And you know what they're not doing now, Elle Duncan? They're not doing 40 minutes on the WNBA when Caitlin Clark wasn't playing.
There's the reality check. Monica McNutt and others kept insisting there were compelling storylines before Caitlin Clark arrived. Great competition, exciting players, important narratives that deserved attention. But here's the problem with that argument. If those storylines were actually compelling to a mainstream audience, people would have been watching. The numbers don't lie. Before the 2024 season, WNBA games averaged around 400,000 viewers on a good night. Most games pulled in between 2,000 and 300,000. Compare that to the Indiana Fever's games with Caitlin Clark, which routinely hit 1.5 to 2 million viewers. Her playoff games against Connecticut pulled over 3 million viewers. That's not a slight increase. That's a complete transformation of the product's marketability.
To the CBA negotiation. Dun, 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 dun. We're just going to talk about it a little bit. Obviously still ongoing. We talked about that earlier in our pod today. You actually were quoted somewhere saying this is the first time you have zero fear around the league folding, right? Which I totally know what you mean. It's like in other negotiations, there was always not like it was actually going to fold, but it was like, hey, we got to figure this out. How are we going to do this? Kind of a vibe. All right. So from your perspective, what should be like the high priorities for this agreement?
It's been interesting to kind of see how it has all evolved. And one of the things that strikes me is like the deal that, as you read it, that the owners have on the table for the players. And, I'm not privy to all of the information, but like, it looks like a pretty amazing deal. And that, like, if the players took the deal that's on the table right now, they should feel great about it because it's huge salaries. It is.
And this is where Rebecca Lobo, a WNBA legend and Hall of Famer, steps in with some much needed perspective. She's not some outside critic. She's someone who played in the league, who understands the struggles, who wants these players to succeed. And even she's saying, you're losing people with how you're communicating. Look at what's actually on the table in these CBA negotiations. A maximum salary over $1.2 million. An average salary around $500,000. Revenue sharing for the first time in league history. Full benefits, including housing stipends, childcare support, and travel accommodations that go far beyond what previous generations received. The owners are offering to continue investing in practice facilities, charter flights, and infrastructure improvements. Rebecca Lobo practiced at a middle school gym on the Upper East Side when she played for the New York Liberty, on a court that wasn't even regulation size. That was the reality for WNBA players for years. The current generation has legitimate NBA-level facilities, and they're about to get even more. But when that offer gets presented, The response from the Players Association was to call it a slap in the face.
Some of the rhetoric I've heard from their side has been a little bit troublesome. You know, like when a deal is presented that's over $1 million max salary and revenue share, it's called a slap in the face. Like it's that just use different words, and I'm worried that the players might be getting to a point where they might be losing some of the support from the public, and I think that's been a big part of this.
That phrase right there, the slap in the face. That's what Rebecca Lobo is talking about when she mentions the rhetoric problem, because to the average person watching this unfold, calling a $1.2 million max contract a slap in the face doesn't land the way players think it does. The median household income in America is around $75,000. Most people will never see $500,000 in a single year, let alone as an average salary. So when WNBA players publicly reject that offer with language that suggests it's insulting, it creates a disconnect. Not because the players don't deserve good compensation, they absolutely do, but because the framing makes it seem like they're out of touch with the economic reality most fans live in.
This is before Nafisa's comments. Again, it felt like, wow, the players have 100% support of the fan base in the WNBA. And as these negotiations have gone on, it feels like some of that is waning. And I think some of it has just been some of the language and the verbiage and that sort of thing that we've heard from the Players Association. I think the players just need to be a little bit more careful with how they're articulating things, because if you're working whatever job, a max salary of 1.2 million, average salary of 500,000, if you don't think it's fair, that's fine, but don't call it a slap in the face. You know, I think that there's there are things that need to be done a little bit better when it comes to the language during these negotiations.
And here's what's particularly damaging about this whole situation. The players had overwhelming public support going into these negotiations. The pay us what you owe us shirts at the All-Star game, fans were behind that. The push for better travel conditions and charter flights, fans supported it. The demand for revenue sharing, most people thought that was completely reasonable given the league's growth. But then something shifted. Nneka Ogwumike's comments about Commissioner Kathy Engelbert got booed heavily at a game in Las Vegas. Not because fans suddenly turned against players asking for fair compensation, but because the tone and approach started feeling entitled rather than justified. When you're getting booed by your own fan base during what should be a moment of solidarity, that's a sign something has gone wrong with your messaging.
I agree 1000% with Rebecca Lobo. Y'all don't know what y'all doing. Y'all don't know what y'all getting in front of these cameras and microphones and saying. Y'all sound ridiculous. And I also think that there were a lot of fans who are unaware of a lot of the perks and the things that the WNBA has done and does do for these players, to be honest with you. So I think a lot of this information coming out has turned people off from the players, and it has lost some support from the people amongst the players. And it seems like there's been a shift toward more people are actually in lockstep with the owners than they are the players right now. You know what I mean? And I think, you know, you got Natasha Cloud saying ridiculous things. Nafisa Collier saying, I'm showing y'all how to run a business and they can't even get no viewership. TNT might want to get out the damn deal. I mean, it's just been ridiculous. So I agree 100% with Rebecca Lobo. Get down in the comments and let me know what you think. Just keep the vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel.
Rebecca Lobo is pointing out something crucial here. This isn't just about the specific words being used. It's about media training, or the lack of it. It's about understanding how your message lands with different audiences. Caitlin Clark seems to be one of the few players who consistently navigates media interactions without alienating people. She gives thoughtful answers, she acknowledges her teammates and the league's history, she doesn't make inflammatory statements that can be taken out of context. Compare that to Natasha Cloud saying the WNBA should opt out of its media deal because the league isn't being promoted properly. Or Nafisa Collier launching Unrivaled and positioning it as showing people how to run a business while the league struggles to draw viewers. These aren't calculated PR moves. These are unforced errors that give ammunition to critics and make casual fans question whether they want to support these players. The perks the WNBA provides have also become more visible during these negotiations, and that's changed the conversation. full housing during the season, child care support and family planning benefits, mental health resources, nutrition programs, performance bonuses. The league has been investing heavily in player welfare, but much of that wasn't widely known until recently. Now that fans are learning about it, the "pay us what you owe us" message hits differently. Here's the fundamental tension. The players are absolutely correct that they should benefit from the league's growth. They're the product. They're the ones people are paying to watch. Revenue sharing makes sense. Better salaries make sense. The problem isn't what they're asking for. The problem is how they're asking for it. And more importantly, how they're characterizing the offers they're receiving. When Sophie Cunningham recently indicated that a lockout looks increasingly likely, it raised a question. Are the players willing to sacrifice a season over the gap between what's offered and what they're demanding? Because the owners have already moved significantly from where they started. They've put revenue sharing on the table for the first time ever. They've more than doubled the maximum salary. They've committed to continued infrastructure investment. If the players walk away from that, if they force a lockout and cancel the 2025 season, they'll be gambling that public support holds. But based on the reaction to their rhetoric so far, that's not a safe bet. The momentum the WNBA built in 2024 was extraordinary, but it's also fragile. A lockout would give casual fans permission to tune out and potentially never come back. And that brings us to the Caitlin Clark factor that nobody wants to acknowledge directly. The explosion in WNBA viewership wasn't evenly distributed across the league. It was concentrated in games involving the Indiana Fever. When Caitlin Clark wasn't playing, the ratings dropped back toward historical norms. When she was injured and missed games, the attention disappeared almost immediately. Unrivaled is learning this lesson right now. Despite featuring stars like Breanna Stewart, Nafisa Collier, and Angel Reese, the 3-on-3 league is struggling to generate significant viewership or mainstream media coverage. TNT is reportedly reconsidering its investment. Major sports shows that spent hours debating WNBA storylines during the regular season barely mention Unrivaled. That's not because these players aren't talented. It's because star power in women's basketball right now is heavily concentrated in one person, and she's not playing. This creates an uncomfortable reality for CBA negotiations. The players want to be compensated based on the league's 2024 success. But that success was disproportionately driven by one player who just finished her rookie season. She's not the one leading the Players Association. She's not the one doing interviews about the CBA. She's staying relatively quiet while other players position themselves as the faces of this negotiation. That disconnect matters because the leverage the players think they have might not actually exist. If the league locks out and Caitlin Clark spends the summer doing international basketball tours or corporate partnerships, she'll be fine. Her marketability doesn't depend on the WNBA existing. But for many other players, the league is their primary platform. Without it, their visibility and earning potential drops dramatically. Rebecca Lobo understands this dynamic. She's seen multiple CBA negotiations. She knows that public perception matters, especially for a league that still relies heavily on goodwill and cultural momentum rather than pure market forces. The WNBA doesn't have the NBA's luxury of being so established that it can weather labor disputes without existential risk. Every negotiation carries the possibility of setback, and that's why the rhetoric matters so much. When players call a strong offer a slap in the face, when they suggest new fans are ruining the league's culture, when they position themselves as victims despite receiving unprecedented investment and support, they're eroding the foundation of public goodwill that the league desperately needs. The owners aren't perfect here either. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has made some tone-deaf comments about the league's financial situation. The marketing and promotion of WNBA stars beyond Caitlin Clark has been inadequate. The schedule is still poorly constructed, with too many back-to-backs and insufficient rest. There are legitimate grievances, but negotiations require both sides to operate strategically. The players had maximum leverage coming off the best season in league history. They had fans energized and ready to support them. They had media attention at an all-time high, and they've spent the last few months steadily diminishing that leverage through poor communication and unrealistic public positioning. Elle Duncan's comment about new fans sucking the life out of the WNBA perfectly encapsulates the problem. Instead of welcoming growth and embracing the expanded audience, there's been resistance and gatekeeping. Instead of recognizing that Caitlin Clark brought millions of people into the sport who might become long-term fans of other players and teams, there's been resentment and minimization of her impact. Rebecca Lobo is trying to warn the players that this approach is backfiring. The fans see what's happening. They see the benefits players receive. They see the investment the league is making. They see the generous offer on the table. And when players reject all of that as insufficient while using inflammatory language, it doesn't inspire solidarity. It inspires frustration. The question now is whether the players will adjust their strategy or double down. Will they recognize that they're losing the PR battle and recalibrate their messaging? Or will they push forward toward a lockout, confident that fans will ultimately side with labor over management? Based on the trajectory so far, it seems like they're heading toward confrontation. Sophie Cunningham's recent comments suggest the sides are still far apart, even after 2 deadline extensions. The Players Association doesn't appear ready to accept what's currently offered. The owners have indicated they don't have much more room to move financially. So we might be looking at a canceled 2025 season. And if that happens, the WNBA will face a crucial test. Will the momentum from 2024 survive a year-long gap? Will Caitlin Clark's fans stay engaged with the league even when she's not playing? Will casual viewers who just started paying attention maintain their interest through a labor dispute? The players seem to believe the answer is yes, that the league has reached a tipping point where it's too big to fail, too culturally significant to fade back into obscurity. But that confidence might be misplaced. The WNBA has had false dawns before, moments of increased attention that didn't translate into sustained growth. The 1990s launch, with stars like Lisa Leslie and Cheryl Swoops, generated excitement that eventually plateaued. The 2000s had moments of momentum that fizzled. What happened in 2024 felt different because the numbers were so dramatically higher, but those numbers were tied to specific circumstances, primarily Caitlin Clark's presence and the media narrative around her rookie season. Without her playing, without that storyline driving coverage, the league reverts to something much smaller and more niche. That's not an insult to the other players, it's just market reality. And it's why Rebecca Lobo's warning matters. The players need to understand their actual leverage, not their perceived leverage. They need to communicate in ways that maintain public support rather than erode it. They need to recognize that calling a transformative offer a slap in the face makes them look out of touch, not a If they don't adjust, they're going to lose this negotiation in the court of public opinion, even if they eventually get some of what they're asking for financially.
And in a league that still depends heavily on cultural cachet and goodwill, that's a loss they can't afford. So what happens next? Do the players take Rebecca Lobo's advice and soften their rhetoric? Do they accept something close to the current offer and declare victory? Or do they force a lockout and gamble that the league's momentum survives a year without basketball? The answer will determine whether 2024 was the beginning of the WNBA's breakthrough or just another temporary spike that fades back to baseline. And right now, based on how the players are handling this negotiation, the odds don't look great. They're pushing away the very fans who could sustain the league's growth. They're undermining their own leverage with poor communication. They're turning what should be a moment of triumph into a potential disaster. Rebecca Lobo sees it. The question is whether the players will listen before it's too late.